chess club laughed when I joined, having no clue I was a Grandmaster who'd beaten world champions. I walked into Lincoln High's chess club meeting, carrying a backpack and wearing clothes from Goodwill that didn't quite fit. The room smelled like old textbooks and teenage desperation. 12 students sat around folding tables with cheap plastic chess sets, and every single one looked up when I entered. The club president, a senior named Dominic Zhao, stood near the whiteboard where someone had written "State Championship or Bust" in red marker. He sized me up with barely concealed disdain, his eyes moving from my scuffed shoes to my faded jacket. Dominic asked if I was lost. I said I wanted to join the chess club, and the room erupted in snickers. A girl with pink-streaked hair named Veronica Lim actually laughed out loud. Dominic exchanged glances with his vice president, Trevor Banks, and asked if I even knew how the pieces moved. I said I knew a little about chess, and that made Trevor laugh so hard he had to wipe his eyes. He said they weren't a beginner's club, that this was serious competitive chess for students preparing for state and regional tournaments. He suggested I try the school library. I stood there letting them have their moment, because I'd learned over the past 3 months that explaining who I really was only made things harder. My name was Alexei Volkov, and I'd earned my Grandmaster title at 14 after beating 3 world champions in tournament play across Europe. I'd competed in 12 countries, studied under Viktor Kovalenko himself, and had been ranked in the top 50 players globally by 16. But those credentials belonged to a different life, one that ended when my father got arrested for embezzlement, and my mother moved us to this small Oregon town where nobody had heard of me, and I intended to keep it that way. Dominic said I could stay and watch if I promised not to distract the actual members. He pointed to a chair in the corner near the dusty trophy case. I sat down and pulled out a notebook, pretending to do homework while watching them set up their games. Veronica played against a freshman named Kevin Park. Trevor challenged another senior named Aisha Rahman. Dominic moved between tables offering advice in a voice loud enough to make sure everyone heard how knowledgeable he was. Their games were mediocre at best. Kevin played scared. Veronica had memorized some openings, but didn't understand the underlying principles. Trevor played aggressively with no real plan. Aisha was actually competent, probably the best player in the room, but she kept second-guessing herself and missing obvious tactical opportunities. Dominic's advice was textbook stuff that showed he'd read about chess without really understanding it. Watching them was like watching someone who'd learned to cook from recipes but had never developed actual culinary intuition. After 30 minutes, Dominic noticed me watching and asked if I understood what was happening. I said it looked like standard positional play, and Trevor snorted. He explained in a condescending voice that they were employing advanced strategic concepts that would be way over my head. Veronica added that chess at their level required years of study. I nodded and went back to my notebook, writing down the position from Aisha's game and mentally calculating the forced mate in 7 moves that she was missing. Trevor's game would be over in 4 moves if his opponent saw the knight fork coming. I wrote it all down and said nothing. The meeting ended with Dominic announcing that the regional qualifier was in 6 weeks. He said Lincoln High hadn't sent anyone to state finals in 8 years, and this was their year to change that. As people packed up, Veronica noticed me still sitting there and asked if I'd be coming back. I said probably, and she exchanged a look with Trevor that clearly communicated they thought that was unfortunate. Dominic told me if I wanted to join officially, I'd need to pay $20 club dues. I said I'd think about it and left. My mom picked me up in our 15-year-old Toyota, and she asked how chess club went. I said it was fine, and she caught the tone that meant it wasn't. She asked if I told them about my background, and I said no, that we'd agreed I would keep that private. She looked relieved because she was still dealing with the fallout from my father's arrest, and the last thing she needed was reporters tracking us down. We drove home to our tiny apartment in silence while I thought about whether hiding who I was had been the right choice. That evening, I set up my chessboard and replayed games from world championship matches I'd studied years ago. The pieces moved in patterns that felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived. Chess was the only thing that made sense anymore. The only place where the rules were clear and talent actually mattered. I'd lost my father, my home, my country, and my reputation, but I still had chess. Nobody could take away the patterns I'd learned or the thousands of games I'd memorized or the instincts I'd developed. Those belonged to me regardless of where I lived. I went back to chess club the next week with $20 I'd earned washing dishes at a restaurant where my mom worked. Dominic took the money and wrote my name on a roster. He said they were doing a club tournament that day to determine seeding for the regional qualifier. Everyone would play everyone else in rapid games, 15 minutes per player. The winner would get first seed and the honor of representing Lincoln High as their top player. He looked directly at me when he explained that this tournament was only for experienced players, and maybe I should just observe since I was so new. I said I'd like to play, and Trevor laughed and said it was my funeral. And then everything changed. Full story is linked below.